I'm Logan, 29 years old, living alone in a quiet neighborhood just outside of Oak Ridge, Tennessee. I work as a full-time auto mechanic at a local garage. Not glamorous, but honest work, and I genuinely enjoy fixing things. About 2 years ago, I bought a modest little house here. I'm still paying off the mortgage, but it's mine. It's on a peaceful street with good folks around. The kind of place where neighbors still wave to each other in the morning. One of those neighbors is Sarah. She and her husband Mark live right across the street. No kids, both around 30, married for maybe 5 or 6 years. From the outside, they seemed like a normal couple. Mark's a pretty laid-back guy, always friendly. We'd sometimes watch games together, barbecue in the summer. And Sarah, she was easy to talk to. We never crossed any lines, just casual neighborly friendship. Nothing weird, nothing flirtatious, at least not from my end. But over the past few months, something shifted. Every time I bumped into Sarah, whether grabbing the mail, pulling in from work, or walking past her house, she had this tension about her. Little by little, she started venting to me. At first, it was just small things. Mark staying late at work, being distracted. Then it got heavier. She said he was barely around, barely talking. That he had messages on his phone from names she didn't recognize. She didn't come out and say it at first, but I could tell she thought he was cheating. I never knew what to say. I mean, what do you say in that situation? I wasn't about to take sides, but I listened, nodded, and tried to be respectful. One night, we were standing by the sidewalk. She'd just come back from a walk. I'd pulled in from work. She looked exhausted. I asked if she was okay. She just sighed and said, "Great." He said he was working late, but he didn't even bring his laptop home. I shrugged and said, without even thinking, "Maybe you should just leave him." I don't know why I said that. I didn't mean anything by it. It just came out like a dumb joke. One of those throwaway comments you expect to get brushed off. But she didn't laugh. She didn't smile. She didn't even blink. She just looked at me, really looked at me, and then said quietly, "Yeah, maybe." Then she turned and walked away. No goodbye, no wave, nothing. And I just stood there like an idiot, watching her go, wondering if I'd said something way out of line. I spent the rest of the night trying to shake it off. Told myself she was probably just tired. Maybe she didn't even hear me properly. Or maybe she did, and it hit a nerve. Either way, I figured that was the end of it. I wasn't about to bring it up again. I wasn't looking for drama, especially not with neighbors. So the next day, I went about my business like usual. Worked a double shift at the garage, came home around 9:30 p.m., popped open a beer, turned on the game. I was halfway through a bag of chips when I heard a knock at the door. That was weird. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it, and there she was, Sarah, standing on my front porch with 2 bags and a look I'll never forget. She didn't wait for me to say anything. She just said, "I filed the papers this morning. I can't stay in that house another night." I blinked, still trying to process. "Mark's there?" I asked. She nodded. "Yeah, but I'm not anymore." I looked at her bags, then at her face. I still had no idea what was happening. She raised an eyebrow. "Are you going to let me in or just stand there?" I stepped aside. "Oh yeah, come in." She walked in, dropped her bags by the couch, and sat down like she belonged there. Like this was the most normal thing in the world. And me, I was frozen. I didn't know if I should be calling Mark or calling a therapist. She looked up and said, "I'll sleep on the couch. I just need somewhere to breathe tonight." I nodded slowly. "Okay." She laid down, pulled a throw blanket over herself, and within minutes she was asleep. I stood there for another few seconds, then grabbed my phone, stepped outside, and called Mark. He answered on the second ring. "Hey," I said. Can we talk?" Mark sounded confused at first, like he wasn't sure if I dialed him by mistake. "Yeah, sure," he said. "What's up?" I told him I was outside, that I didn't want to talk on the phone, and asked if I could come by for a few minutes. He said, "Yeah, no problem." I threw on a hoodie, grabbed a couple beers from the fridge, and walked across the street. My hands were shaking a little, not because I was scared, just tense. I didn't know how this conversation was going to go. I was worried it might blow up, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. Still, it's not every day your neighbor's wife shows up at your place with luggage. Mark opened the door. He was in sweatpants and a t-shirt, barefoot. Looked like he hadn't slept well. The lights were dim. He stepped aside and let me in. "Beer?" I offered, holding one out. He nodded. "Yeah, thanks." We sat out back on his porch. It was quiet, just the hum of crickets and a few porch lights across the street. I didn't waste time. "Man, I want to say this straight," I said. "I don't want things to get weird between us, so I'm being upfront. Sarah's at my place. She showed up about an hour ago with bags. She said she filed for divorce and didn't want to be in the house with you." He took a long sip of beer, didn't say anything at first, just stayed into the darkness beyond the backyard. "I didn't invite her," I added. "And I swear to you, Mark, there's nothing going on between me and her. Never was, never will be. I just didn't want you to find out some other way." He nodded slowly. "She told me she was filing. I figured she'd go to her sister's." I didn't know what to say to that. After a pause, he turned to me. "I appreciate you telling me, man. Really, I know you, Logan. You're not that guy." He leaned back in his chair and sighed. "Honestly, I'm just tired. I've been trying to keep this marriage afloat for years. She's never happy. When I wasn't working enough, she said I was lazy. Now that I'm working late, she says I'm cheating. There's no winning with her. She mentioned seeing weird messages on your phone." He scoffed. "That was a client. I do side jobs, mobile detailing on the weekends. It was a woman asking about an appointment. Nothing else." But Sarah read into it. "She really believes you're cheating." "I'm not, but I also stopped trying to convince her months ago." "You ever get to that point where you're just done defending yourself?" "That's where I'm at." I nodded. "I get it. She's always been like this. Intense, emotional. The highs are great, but the lows, man, the lows are rough. I tried to stick it out, but I'm just drained." We sat there in silence for a while. "I'll let her stay a few days," I said. "Just until she figures out what's next." I told her the couch is hers for now. "I've got my folks coming into town next week anyway." Mark nodded again. "That's cool. Honestly, I don't even care where she stays. I just want peace for once." "I hope this doesn't mess things up between us," I added. He looked me dead in the eyes. "Logan, you're probably the only neighbor I trust. I know your character. If she's with you, I know she's safe, and I know you won't cross any lines." I exhaled, relieved. We sat there for another hour, just talking. Not about Sarah anymore. Just life, work, cars, dumb stories from the bar last summer. We laughed a few times. It felt good to be real with someone. Eventually, I headed home. When I stepped inside, the house was quiet. Sarah was still asleep on the couch, wrapped in a throw blanket like she hadn't moved. Her phone was next to her, face down. She looked peaceful, not like the person who'd been venting to me for weeks, just calm. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stood there for a minute, trying to process it all. She really did it. She left him, and for some reason she came to me. I wasn't flattered. I wasn't proud. If anything, I was uncomfortable. Not because I didn't care, but because I did. And I didn't want to be the reason two people's marriage fell apart. Even if it was already cracking. I headed to bed. As I laid there, staring at the ceiling, I kept thinking about what I said the night before. Maybe you should just leave him. It was supposed to be a joke. I never thought she'd actually do it. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Sunlight was just starting to cut through the blinds. For a second, I thought I'd dreamed the whole thing, that Sarah had never knocked on my door, that she wasn't asleep on my couch with a bag full of her life sitting next to her. But when I walked into the living room, she was already awake. She was sitting on the couch with a cup of coffee, wrapped in that same throw blanket, wearing a hoodie and joggers. She'd tied her hair back, no makeup, just real. When she saw me, she gave a faint smile. Nothing forced, just tired. "Morning," she said. "Hey," I replied, still trying to shake off the sleep. "You slept okay?" She nodded. "Better than I have in weeks." I made myself a coffee and sat down on the armchair across from her. There was a weird silence between us. Not awkward, just heavy. Like neither of us wanted to be the first to bring it all up. But I had to. I couldn't ignore the elephant in the room. "Sarah," I said slowly, "can I ask you something?" She looked up from her coffee. "Why me?" She blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean you have family, friends, a million other places you could have gone. Why did you come here? To my place?" She looked down at her coffee, thought for a moment, then answered. "Because I trust you. Because you've always been honest with me. You never judged. And because when you said what you said yesterday, I realized maybe I needed someone to finally say it out loud." I leaned back. "That was a stupid comment. I didn't mean it. Not really." "But it made me think," she said, "and it made me look around and ask myself, what am I even still doing in that house with someone who doesn't love me anymore?" I didn't know what to say to that. I felt like anything I said would either sound fake or too personal. "Sarah," I said carefully, "have you considered the possibility that maybe Mark's not cheating?" She didn't respond right away. "He's never around, Logan," she said. "He works late. He comes home tired, barely looks at me. No connection, no intimacy, just two strangers living in the same space. That's not a marriage." "But what if he's just working? What if he's actually trying his own way?" She shook her head. "I don't want to talk about him." I nodded. "Okay. I just want to make sure you're not jumping off a cliff that maybe didn't need jumping from." Her voice dropped. I already jumped. We sat there for a few minutes, sipping coffee. Then I told her, "Look, you can stay here for a few days, a week, tops. After that, I've got my parents coming in from out of town, and I'll need the space." She nodded. "I understand. I'll start looking for something today." I left for work around 10 o'clock. I was running behind and didn't say much more. As I pulled out of the driveway, I glanced at her standing in the doorway, arms folded, watching me go. She looked lost, and it wasn't just about Mark. It was like she didn't know who she was outside that marriage. All day at the garage, I kept running the situation over in my head. I told myself again and again, this isn't your problem. Don't get involved. You did what any decent person would do, offered help when someone needed it. Nothing more. But a part of me still felt responsible. Like that one dumb sentence, "Maybe you should just leave him," had become more than a joke. Like it had somehow pulled the trigger on something that was already loaded. When I got home that night, she wasn't on the couch. I panicked for a second, thought maybe she'd left without saying anything. But then I saw her through the kitchen window, sitting in the backyard, scrolling on her phone. I walked outside. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Yeah," she said. "I've been calling around. Found a couple of short-term rentals, but everything's either too expensive or booked." I sat on the porch step next to her. "Don't rush. You got a few more days. Take your time." She looked over at me. "Thank you, Logan, for letting me crash here. I know it's not your problem." "It's okay," I said. "I mean, it kind of is now, but it's fine." She laughed softly. First time I'd heard her laugh since all this started. Later that evening, I got a text from Mark. "Thanks again for talking last night. Just so you know, I'm not angry. Honestly, I'm relieved it's all finally out in the open. I just want her to find whatever peace she's looking for." I stared at that message for a while. It was so final. I didn't reply right away. Just sat with it. I knew then that this wasn't going to go back to normal. Not for them. Maybe not even for me. Whatever line existed between being a neighbor and being in the middle of someone else's marriage. It had already been crossed, whether I meant to or not. By the third day, things settled into a strange rhythm. Sarah woke up early, helped clean up the kitchen, made coffee, and mostly kept to herself. She didn't ask for anything, didn't act like she lived there. More like she was trying hard not to overstay, even though she was already in deeper than either of us planned. I'd come home from the garage around 6 o'clock, and she'd be either reading, scrolling on her phone, or sometimes cooking something simple. Not to be polite, just to feel useful, I guess. She didn't talk much about Mark, and I didn't bring him up, but I still felt it. The tension, the weight of unspoken things between us. One evening after dinner, we sat outside on the porch. It was quiet, just the sound of bugs, the occasional car down the street, and the soft clink of her spoon stirring tea. She looked out at the yard and said, "You ever feel like your life is just happening, and you're not even in it?" I didn't answer right away. Like she continued, "You're watching someone else go through the motions, cleaning, working, smiling when you're supposed to, but none of it feels real." I nodded slowly. Yeah, I've had days like that. Especially when I first moved here. I'd wake up, look around this house, and think, is this it? Just me and a mortgage? She smiled a little. At least you've built something. This house is yours. You work. You make decisions. You don't have to ask someone if it's okay to buy a lamp or take a weekend off. You could have had that too. I thought I did, she said, her voice soft. But it wasn't real. Or maybe I just kept convincing myself it was. She paused and looked over at me. I don't want to be dramatic, Logan. I know I showed up out of nowhere, and you've been more than generous, but it started to sink in. I actually did it. I left. And there's no going back. I sat back in my chair. You sure about that? I'm sure. I didn't want to live the rest of my life waiting for someone to change. We were quiet for a while. She sipped her tea. I looked up at the stars. Then I said, "You know, Mark doesn't hate you." She glanced at me surprised. He told me he's tired, burnt out, but he also said he hopes you find peace. Sarah looked down. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. He used to say that to me too, that he hoped I'd find peace. I never knew if it was out of love or just to get me to stop talking. I didn't respond to that. I couldn't, because part of me thought she might be right. The rest of the week passed with the same quiet rhythm. She cleaned the guest bathroom. She bought groceries once and insisted on paying for them. I told her it wasn't necessary, but she wanted to contribute. She was careful about boundaries, never crossed into my room, never stayed up late talking. There was no romantic energy between us, just shared silence, shared space. On the 6th day, I came home and found her folding her clothes in the living room. She looked up and smiled. "I found a place," she said. "Short-term lease, month to month. It's small, but it'll work." I nodded. "That's good." I moved tomorrow morning. My cousin's coming with his truck. I stood there for a second, unsure what to say. "I just wanted to thank you," she continued, "for everything. For not making this more complicated than it already was." "You didn't have to thank me," I said, "but I appreciate it." She hesitated. "I know this whole thing started with something you said jokingly, and maybe it stuck with me more than it should have. But don't blame yourself." I gave a short laugh. "Too late." "Seriously," she said. "You didn't break us. We were already broken. That night, we didn't talk much." She went to bed early. I stayed up watching TV, but I couldn't focus. My mind was racing. Part of me felt relief. Things are going back to normal. No more tension. No more walking on eggshells. But another part of me felt this strange emptiness, like something had entered my life unexpectedly, stirred everything around, and was now leaving just as quietly. The next morning, I helped her load the bags into her cousin's truck. She hugged me before getting in. It wasn't long or emotional, just a sincere thank you from someone who needed shelter and got it. As the truck pulled away, I stood there for a few minutes, hands in my pockets, watching them disappear down the street. Then I went back inside. The house was quiet again. Too quiet. That evening, Mark came over, knocked once, then opened the screen door like he used to. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. "Go ahead," I said. He sat on the porch step beside me. Neither of us spoke at first. "She's gone?" he asked. "Yeah, found her own place." He nodded slowly. "She's really done with me, huh?" "I think she made up her mind a while ago," he sighed. "It's weird. I always thought if she left, I'd be angry. But now I just feel numb." We sat in silence for a while. Then he said something I didn't expect. "I'm not mad she came here, and I'm glad it was you, not someone else. You've always been straight with me. I respect that." "Thanks, man." "I'll be all right," he added. "Maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. I'm still young. Got time." We clinked our beer bottles and just sat there. The sun was setting, and everything looked the same as it always had. But somehow, everything had changed. It's been 2 months since Sarah left my house. I still remember that morning clearly. She stood by the open door with her cousin's truck idling at the curb. Her bags were already packed and loaded. She was calm, not emotional, not shaky, just ready. She hugged me once, quick and firm, like someone who knew this was goodbye. No tears, no promises to keep in touch. "Thank you, Logan," she said. "I mean it." I nodded. "I hope it all works out for you." She smiled one last time and got in the truck. And just like that, she was gone. That night, the house felt bigger than usual, emptier. I found myself walking past the couch where she'd slept, still glancing at the throw blanket she'd used, still half folded the way she left it. I didn't touch it for days. Don't ask me why. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was my way of giving her space, even after she was gone. A week later, Mark and I were back to talking. Not like before, not like nothing happened, but better than I expected. We didn't ignore what happened. In fact, we talked about it. He came by one evening, beer in hand, and said, "So what do you think? Was it always going to end this way?" I shrugged. "I don't know, man. I think she made her choice long before I ever said anything." "Yeah," he said, nodding slowly. "I think I made mine too. I just didn't say it out loud." They finalized the divorce quietly. No drama, no big scenes. Mark stayed in the house across the street. He got a new dog, some mutt from the shelter, friendly little thing named Ziggy. I still see him tossing a ball in the yard some mornings. As for Sarah, I have no idea where she went after that first month-to-month rental. She never came back to the neighborhood, never texted, never tried to reconnect, and honestly, I didn't reach out either. We had no unfinished business, no promises, no relationship to rebuild. She came into my life unexpectedly, stayed for a short chapter, and left when the time came. Sometimes people do that. And me? I went back to my routines. Work at the garage, mowing the lawn on Saturdays, grocery runs, fixing up small things around the house. I even started building a small deck out back, a project I'd been putting off for over a year. Life returned to normal, but not the exact same normal. I changed. I started thinking more carefully about my words, about how even a joke, one simple sentence, can have a ripple effect you never intended. I wasn't responsible for a marriage falling apart, but I played a part in the timing. Whether I wanted to or not, I still think about it sometimes. That moment when I said, "Maybe you should just leave him," I thought it was harmless. She heard it as a mirror of something she'd already felt, but hadn't let herself say. And when she showed up at my door the next day, I realized that life doesn't always give you warnings. Sometimes it just knocks. Would I do anything differently? Maybe. Maybe I'd pause before making light of someone's real pain. Maybe I'd choose silence over a sentence I couldn't take back. But then again, maybe it all would have happened anyway. Maybe I was just the last nudge in a line of 100. I don't carry guilt, but I do carry the memory of a week where everything felt sideways, of a couch that became shelter, of two people whose lives had been tied together too long by obligation, not love, and of me, caught in the middle without asking, without expecting it. It's the kind of story you don't plan, the kind you don't forget, and the kind you don't need to repeat to learn something from. So yeah, that was the time I joked that my neighbor should leave her husband. And the next day, she showed up at my door. She stayed for a week, then she left. Her marriage ended. I stayed where I was. Still me, but somehow different. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.